tried to email Scott Adams a few months ago, and I ended up finding another guy called Scott Adams who gets a lot of Scott Adams' email. And he responded to me and said, like, this is not Scott Adams' email, but you know, this email you've sent him, it's like, it's a bit heavy, isn't it? It's like you've come at him. It's like, what is this? And I'm like, well, it's severely tongue-in-cheek, but it's a response to him talking shit, saying that the world's a simulation. And then I ended up getting in a conversation with this guy that went on for about a week, where we went to and fro, and we agreed in the end as to what, me and this other Scott Adams, we actually agreed between us what the world is, that we could agree on. You know, we were able to agree on what we thought the world was, and it's not a simulation. And it'd be, well, what is it? It's like, it's somebody else's sandbox. So it's not a simulation, it's a sandbox. But it's somebody else's. And if it is a simulation, it ain't ours. So we're just in it. So it's like, if you want to call that a simulation, I'll agree to it, but I call it a simulation under God, because there are rules. We can demonstrate there are rules at all levels of this. So it's not our sandbox, but it's a sandbox. So that was the agreement I came with non-Scott Adams to say, yeah, that's what the world is. But no, I've never managed to actually send anything to Scott Adams. But it's like, that I sent him, I'm like, oh, so the world's a simulation, is it? So it's like, I just threw down at him. It's like, well, fair enough. Well, if it's a simulation, well, I can just, like, to the same degree, say it's my simulation, and there's nothing you can say to prove it. So to disprove it. So you opening the door to simulations, opening the door to my tyranny. So it was like a joke. Sent this long joke and said somebody else intercepted it, and he read it, and he's like, fucking hell, he's like, that's some heavy shit you sent that guy. It's like, well, if you'd have known what I were on about, if you'd have been Scott Adams, you'd have got the joke. You'd have thought it was hilarious. Thing is with Scott Adams is like, he thinks out loud. He's very, very good. He's the best I've ever come across at asking questions, and that's incredible. It's like, there's those who know a lot of answers, but it's like those who formulate great questions, they're the ones who gets the truth. He gets that. So all the time he's formulating questions and asking them out loud of himself and his little audience, and then he's simulating them, isn't he? What would happen if? It's usually really fair. It can be arrogant, but saying that, when you've got the insight he's gained in recent years, and all the attention he gets as well, you do well to be arrogant, just to be that bit standoffish to defend yourself. Yeah, I am sure of myself. I don't have to be humble. It's too fucking late for humble. It's like, you've got bullshit World War III, whether it happens or it doesn't, it's a fucking cloud. You've got that hanging over. You failed. You didn't beat the COVID. You're not going to beat that. Dicks on YouTube channels, right, talking about it, saying he needs to learn to be a bit more humble. So this is you fucking mouthing off. It's like, I like a lot of things in people, but, you know, humility ain't one of them. Humility's a mask for a fucking coward. It's too late in the day. It's like, things that preoccupy Scott Adams in his talk are things I've thought about a lot too. And it's like, There's a thing that he's been really good on. It's like, what's Kanye trying to teach us? Now, on this channel, we do cover Kanye. Never heard one of his songs knowingly, you know. And thought of him as the world's biggest buffoon for a good while. It's like, do you get this? This guy's like, not so well put together. But then it's a matter of, hang on a minute. He's showing you something. And it's like, yeah, he's making the system eat him. Eat me, you can't deal with me. The problem with Kanye is, he can get himself in that spot where all the eyes are looking at him, and he's fucking shit. He can't communicate. To say he's such a great communicator, he doesn't seem to say anything meaningful that doesn't get intercepted, misconstrued, and then be contradictory. And again, he can't handle himself. If he ever speaks to anyone, he has to be talking to somebody like Tim fucking Poole, who's going to go out of his way not to hurt his feelings or offend him. Just like, he went about it the right way, but he's fucking rubbish. I have this thing, me, I'm like, you know, the best thing to do if you want to actually try and fight the culture war, right? You're dealing with like a species of human now that isn't ever interested in having a fair fight. They just want to win. They're not interested in the battle. They're not interested in they're not bothered what tactics they'll use to win and avoid a fair fight. Something that's a phrase that Scott Adams has used quite recently. Fair fight, avoid a fair fight. What you're learning. So the correct thing to do is to say, okay, so it's not a fair fight. Your terms are acceptable. What are you going to do? Feed. He's fed himself to the hate machine. Here. Chew on me. See how far this gets you. How about you guys come at me and see how you come off. See how well you do. Now he's well onto this notion that a guy like Kanye West had cancelled himself. It's like he just got rid of it all. It's like he's got no responsibilities or liabilities now outside of his, own business. Cut it all adrift, got rid of it like that. And it's like, in some way, did he free himself? Partially. Scott Adams was like 65 years old or something, 66, maybe a bit older. Isn't skin, doesn't need to work. Recognises that. What can they do to me? It's just people I criticise, more or less on a daily basis, are now calling me a liar and coming after me and calling me a racist, but they've not bothered listening to what I've said, because if you actually listen to what he said, he's been so clever about it. Tricked them into reacting, deliberately gaslit them and pushed all the buttons. That sort of section where he goes into his gets a bit of rhythm going, and he's like, oh, I'm a trained hypnotist, so he gets a bit of rhythm going, gets a bit of speed going, starts to move around, starts to play with the words, starts to hammer them in. Bam, bada, bam, bada, bam, bada, bam. Hits them. Gives them the perfect little sound bites they can clip and make seem like anything they want them to be. Have them. Do it. Do it. Take them. Come after me. Do what you can. Do what you can. Fed himself to them. Yeah, you're not going to be able to deal with this. You're not going to be able to deal with me. None of you can compete. You'll do everything you can to avoid a fair fight, but I'm willing to accept an unfair one. So we're on. It's like it's too late. It's like the thing to do now is to throw down hard and trigger the system. Like he's done, and it's like that's what Kanye was trying to teach, wasn't it? Come out, throw down hard now, trigger the system. It's what I teach. I preach that to those because the world's never going to take my bet. But it'll, you know, there are those it's more interested in than me. It's like there's no profit really. There's no time spent profit to be made from making me out the big racist or whatever. I don't have a presence. If I was to be engaged in person or locally, then I would. If it was real life, massive. But it's not. It's the internet. So it's like, okay, all I can do is say, and I've been saying this is what I've been pushing. It's like, throw down hard at them, understanding the reaction you will get being completely predictable. And then when you get your chance to stand, and stop trying to be reasonable against people who see your reason as weakness and predictability. It's like those who could ostensibly be said to have been leading, right? Leading meaningful spaces, because fundamentally you're in a psychological war, so it's fought in the mind and in speech. Those you're up against have been at war with you from the very start. They want to see you fucking dead. And they clothe themselves in the invisible cloak of righteousness, always on the attack. Vicious, vindictive, manipulative. And they wag the dog, and they're brilliant at it. Waste people's time, deliberately gaslight, deliberately fuck with people, and it's, to my mind, becoming more obvious that that's what they're doing. They know the difference between right and wrong. They've just got their enemies and they've got the weapons that they think are going to bring their enemies down. Problem is their enemies are imaginary and essentially themselves. Like the progress Lindsay's making towards understanding they're a Gnostic cult. The world is run by a Gnostic cult of witches. When he puts that together with how like bad girl circles work, in all bad boy circles too, the criminal gangster world. It's like the criminal gangster world that men and women occupy that space. You don't hear about women occupying that space because nobody says nothing about them. It's like the business always carries on, you see. The real boss stays out on the street while the meat goes to prison. Like, you won't even admit that a world like that exists. You can throw all your notions of like widespread delusion in the bin, right? And that be for the low IQ set. Could be true to be said of absolute sheep, but there ain't so many of them no more. They've all been uprated because they've been allowed to take part in these ritual pylons, public humiliations and beatings of one kind or another, and they like it, and they've got a taste for it. So you're up against now sadists It was always sadistic at its core, but now I think it's gone even further than that. And then sadist, and at the same time more mystic than before. You're seeing more people, or I'm seeing more people, cracking on like the psychic to reach for a fucking threat. Everywhere I look on that Twitter now, I've started leaving them tweets saying, it must be amazing to have psychic power like that. Have you ever considered using your superpowers for good? Just read one a few minutes ago. No one of sound mind would ever take you seriously. No one of sound mind. It wasn't directed towards me. It was a general insult levied at a stranger by an anonymous person on Twitter. It's like, hey man, it's like with powers like that, it's like you could bring the fucking countries together, man. Can't you be that bridge between Ukrainian and Russian with this amazing psychic power? You know, as the culture war goes, I've made very little impression personally, but I tell you what, when it comes to the end of it, when I look back, it's like, I can look at that screenshot I took where Uri Geller's blocked me. And, you know, basically know I was on the side of right. Uri Geller blocked you. Some psychic, that fella, isn't he? You're a threat to me. You're taking the piss. Blocked. It's like, wow, your psychic powers are really fucking strong, aren't they?